Democrats have just lost a legal battle to stop Donald Trump's funding of the border wall. Their argument, because they set the budgets or allocate funds, Trump doesn't have the right to do what he's doing and reallocating funds. But apparently, a judge has ruled House Democrats cannot sue Trump over his plan to pay for the wall. The court declines to take sides in this fight between the House and the president. Why won't they fund the border wall? I don't know if Trump's grandiose 30-foot high, massive wall from sea to shining sea makes sense. But you know what? My understanding is Trump's walked pretty far back from that. And a lot of his more ardent supporters were upset. But my understanding now, he's just acting on the recommendation of ICE and CBP, which is select fencing in certain areas. Why wouldn't the Democrats go for that? And I find the whole thing frustrating, and you know my opinion on the matter, as we frequently cover this story on this channel, is that it feels like the Democrats are more concerned about stopping Trump than actually solving the problem. And it is a problem. And we have more evidence that there's a problem today, because this isn't the only story. ICE is struggling to contain the spread of mumps in its detention centers. I'm not going to blame ICE for that. We have a massive migrant crisis right now. There are, 100,000 families or some ridiculously high number, over 100,000 apprehended in like a month or something. I don't want to get the numbers wrong, so please, I'm not trying to exaggerate. What I do know is there have been more apprehensions this year than all of last year, and we're only, 6 months in, and they actually broke the record by like March or April. So yes, everyone at this point, at least honest people, are saying we have a serious crisis. You're seeing the publications say it. You see a lot of people talk about the spread of measles and chickenpox, and they blame anti-vaxxers. By all means, I think vaccinations are important. But here's the thing. The people who are coming through the border are not vaccinated. That's just a fact. And now mumps and other diseases are spreading through ICE detention centers. You can't necessarily just blame ICE for that if ICE is just trying to, apprehend and register and make sure that people coming in are being accounted for. And then there's a lot of people who are going to be like, they shouldn't be doing that. I'll stop. The far left doesn't want, whatever ICE is doing they don't want ICE to exist, okay? Well, there are kids dying in the desert. And we need CBP and ICE to be dealing with this problem. So here's what we're going to do. Let's read into what's exactly going on with the judge ruling over the House Democrats and their defeat, the victory for Donald Trump. Before we get started, go to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. But of course, the best thing you could do is just like, comment, share the video, subscribe, because the engagement does wonders. The story from BuzzFeed says, House Democrats on Monday lost the first round in the court fight over the Trump administration's plan to reprogram billions of dollars in federal funds to pay for a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. A federal judge in Washington denied the House's request for a preliminary injunction blocking the administration's plans, which involve moving around money from U.S. Department of Defense sources and the U.S. Treasury. U.S. District Judge Trevor McFadden wrote that the U.S. Constitution didn't give the House the ability to sue over a funding fight, and therefore the court couldn't get involved. The complete independence of the judiciary is peculiarly essential under our constitutional structure. I just woke up, sorry. I didn't really just wake up, and this independence requires that the courts take no active resolution whatsoever in political fights between the other branches, McFadden wrote. And while the Constitution bestows upon members of the House many powers, it does not grant them standing to hail the executive branch into court, claiming a dilution of Congress's legislative authority. McFadden didn't get into the substance of the fight over whether Trump could legally reprogram these funds to pay for border construction instead. He wrote that the court declines to take sides in this fight between the House and the president. Now, interestingly, I wonder, we have checks and balances, right? If Trump does something, there should be the ability of someone to do something about it. But I guess in this instance, the House the legislative challenges the executive, and the judiciary stays out of it. So I guess it's an impasse. I guess Trump wins, and he's going to carry on. This is the first bout in the legal battle, they say. I wonder where it will go next, but let's read on. McFadden didn't get into the substance of the fight over whether Trump could legally reprogram these funds to pay for border construction. Oh, did I read that already? The judge wrote that he wasn't saying Congress could never sue the executive branch to protect its powers, but at least in this case, the House has failed to show it had standing to sue. I think the issue here is that Trump, his ability to move money around from where he's moving it, it's actually within his discretion as the head of the executive branch. I could be wrong. McFadden found that the House had other institutional tools to combat the administration, even if they hadn't been successful so far, such as voting to reverse the president's actions. Congress voted to void the national emergency declaration, but the House didn't have enough votes to undo Trump's veto, or passing a new funding bill that stops the administration from transferring the money to pay for the wall the way that Trump is doing now. Trump announced in February that he would declare a national emergency and redirect billions of dollars in federal funds to pay for construction at the border. Congress designated $1.375 billion for border barrier construction earlier this year, but Trump's plan would involve reprogramming an additional $2.5 billion from Department of Defense counter-drug efforts, $600 million from the Treasury Forfeiture Fund, and $3.6 billion in military construction funds to build the wall. Accessing the military construction money required the declaration of a national emergency, tapping the other sources of funds or not. What constitutes a national emergency? I know Obama declared a bunch. Should everything be an emergency? Is drug use an emergency? Well, I'll tell you what. Record migrant apprehensions at the border. Everyone's calling it a crisis. Is crisis synonymous with emergency? I think it's a fair point to be made that there's a serious problem going on, that something needs to be done. And if all I see, look, if the Democrats, instead of just trying to stop Trump, said, here's our alternative, I think there'd be a story here. But I'm looking at BuzzFeed, okay? BuzzFeed is writing this story. And that's what's really fascinating to me is, yes, I'm very critical of many of these outlets, but I use them on purpose when I can to prove a point. I am not pulling this opinion or story from thin air. Okay, this is BuzzFeed saying straight up, please tell me where the Democrats are trying to solve the problem of the crisis when all it seems like they're doing is suing Trump, or trying to, because they don't want him to build a wall. I don't care about what you think is moral or immoral. I care about if you're proposing a solution to the problem. We have mumps outbreaks in the detention centers. Children are dying, and the Democrats are so busy politicking with Trump. Listen, they use the children for politics. They say, oh no, more kids died. It's CBP, it's ICE's fault. Okay, well, let's solve the problem instead of you just saying abolish ICE or Trump's wall is immoral. That literally means nothing to me. So I'm sitting here confused, like, I don't know what the Democrats are doing. I think they're losing their minds. Bill Maher, bless his soul, went on a tirade against Democrats who have no message and are chasing after woke Twitter. Let's read on. House Democrats filed one of several lawsuits challenging the administration's plan. Last month, a federal judge in California temporarily blocked the Trump administration from beginning construction on several sections of border barriers that would be funded by $1 billion reprogrammed from the Department of Defense's drug interdiction program. The decision didn't address funds made available through Trump's declaration of a national emergency. Democrats argued that because Congress explicitly chose not to give the administration the money to Trump, the money Trump wanted to pay for construction of barriers at the U.S.-Mexico border, Trump's plan to use alternative sources violated the Constitution's appropriations clause as well as other federal laws. Actually, it's really, really interesting. I think, look, I am by no means an expert in the way these judges are, but I kind of agree now after, reading through this. Trump asked Congress for money from a specific source. Congress said no. So Trump is appropriating from the sources he has legal access to under the existing laws and following his declaration of emergency. Congress is now trying to sue him to stop him from using something he's constitutionally allowed to do, which makes no sense. It's interesting, I guess, in that Congress doesn't control all of the money of the government, period. They don't. They can appropriate funds in certain directions, yes, but if Trump is legally allowed to use money from the military under a national emergency, they can't stop him from doing what he's allowed to do. And that's, I think the point they made is that they would have to pass some kind of law or a bill. They failed. They didn't have enough to override a veto. The Justice Department argued that the administration was securing funds using processes that Congress had already approved that gave the executive branch flexibility in these sorts of situations. Democrats did not challenge Trump's decision to declare a national emergency. This is what blows my mind. Okay, listen. Congress allocates funds. They say, we want the military to have X billion dollars in case of an emergency. And that money sits there waiting for an emergency. We now have a massive humanitarian crisis on the border. We had a migrant caravan from Africa coming in. Yes, we need to do something to secure the border and stop incentivizing people because they're risking their lives, they're dying, they're getting sick, and they're not vaccinated. They're bringing mumps and other diseases. I'm not saying these are bad people. We want to help them. But, what they say is teach a man to fish, feed him for the rest of his life. We don't want to just be like, yeah, come on in, because that's bad for everybody, especially if they're bringing mumps, okay? We have to contend with the fact that there are people in this country, citizens of the U.S., who do not want to vaccinate their kids. Whatever your stance on the position is, I think we can all agree we don't want to bring in people who do have mumps if certain people in this country are not vaccinating their children. Anyway, the point is, my sympathies, my empathy to those who want to be in America. America is a fabulous country. It's beautiful, it's wealthy, life is great here. But legally, there's a reason for the legal process. I understand it's difficult, but nothing in life worth having was easily obtained, as the saying goes. And you can't just, you can't just open the door to everybody, because then you do get some bad people. You do get people who will exploit the system. You do bring about problems. You do hurt wages. So there's a reason for a legal process, okay? And more importantly, regardless of whether or not you think we can bring in everybody or can't, if we just say coming through the desert, they're getting sick. Kids are dying. Okay, so something needs to be done. Whatever your position on the wall is on immigration, something does need to be done. Congress allocates money to spend things in an emergency. Is this not an emergency? They called it a manufactured crisis over and over again until people started waking up to the fact that there's like 100,000+ people coming in like 1 month or some ridiculous number. And now it's kind of like, oh, maybe this is an emergency. Maybe we have a serious problem that needs to be dealt with. Why are they now mad at Trump that he's using money for a crisis when every major newspaper has called it a crisis, when I believe it was the New York Times saying, Congress, give Trump his money. They're trying to, listen, the New York Times said, Congress, give Trump his money. Seriously. The New York Times said that in their editorial board, and they called it a humanitarian crisis. What does Congress do? They're trying to sue Trump to stop him. They're going in the opposite direction. Look, when you've got major publications agreeing, it sounds like most people in America are kind of like, yeah, that's an emergency. Trump is using his emergency powers to deal with it. Congress, why are you trying to stop that? That's literally what it's for. I could be wrong. I don't think I'm the smartest person in the world, by no means. Well, we'll wrap up. We have a statement from the Justice Department. A Justice Department spokesperson said in a statement that the court rightly ruled that the House of Representatives cannot ask the judiciary to take its side in political disputes and cannot use federal courts to accomplish through litigation what it cannot achieve using the tools the Constitution gives to Congress. The department looks forward to continuing to defend the administration's lawful actions to address the crisis at the southern border. A representative for Nancy Pelosi did not immediately return a request for comment. So all I can really say, I don't want to go on too long, but we do have another story here, is that big win for Trump so far. There's been a big back and forth over Trump's policies and everything, and I don't know. Here's the thing. I'm not an ardent Trump fan. I'm not a sycophant. I'm actually I have a rather distasteful disposition towards Trump over his attitude, his foreign policy. I am prepared, and as I've explained before, for any good reason to say like, okay, I'm not going to go with Trump on this one. But the Democrats have to present something. If the New York Times tells me, okay, this is an emergency, Trump needs the money, Congress give it to him, I go, wow, that's huge. I mean, the New York Times, they're like left-leaning, and they're a major publication that they don't speak for middle America, but they are a prominent and they reach a lot of people. Okay, that's an interesting position for me to be in. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it would be very easy for Democrats to convince me to reject Trump's proposals on what he wants to do with the border. But they have to actually give me something. You know what I mean? So I'm biased against the president over his foreign policy and his personality and things like this. And I understand that. And I also recognize that just because you don't like someone doesn't mean their policies are wrong. So for all I can see right now is Trump's the only one who's got a proposition for fixing what's going on at the southern border. And the economy is doing really well. I'm not stupid enough to ignore those things. But the Democrats don't seem to be bringing anything up. Maybe I won't get into the story because I'm ranting now, but ICE is struggling to contain the spread of mumps in its detention centers. And I see this, and these stories about this and the children who have died and gotten sick, they're being used against ICE. I'm like, how is it ICE's fault that their detention centers are being filled to the brim because the Democrats are trying to stop Trump from securing the border? How is this ICE's fault? When a family brings their child through the desert and their child dies of sepsis and dehydration, that is not CBP's fault, okay? I can fully understand why the family would want to risk everything to come to America. But while I certainly don't want to make it seem like this represents every migrant, every illegal immigrant, every asylum seeker, I have spoken to people, like when I was in Greece, in Europe, A decent amount of the migrants that I met who came, or many of them refugees because they're coming from like Iraq and Afghanistan, told me it was better where they came from, and it's a grass is always greener for some people. Now, for sure, there are absolutely asylum seekers who need our help, and I'm 100% in support of them, and I believe the protecting their lives comes first and foremost. Because of that goodwill, though, there are people who exploit the system. It's true. So I saw someone tweet this story. And the reason I wanted to talk about it is because they tweeted it in a sense that was anti-Trump. They tweeted the story out and used it in a political way to oppose the president. And I said, first of all, Trump isn't bringing mumps here. Second of all, the fact that people have mumps and are coming, and are being detained, and then other people get mumps is not the fault of our detention centers. What do you think we should do? Set up a quarantine zone for everybody? Maybe. The issue is that people are coming in in record numbers. And many of them are not vaccinated, and so they're bringing these, illnesses with them. So I'll stop there. I'll have more segments coming up shortly. You can let me know what you think in the comments below. For those that are listening on the podcast, leave a review. It really helps. For everyone else, share the video, like, comment, because the engagement is great. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you at 1 p.m. on this channel for the next video. The rest of you on the podcast, it will begin shortly.